Hey, all you cool cats and kittens. Yes, life has hit a new low. I'm quoting Tiger King. I cannot believe I spent time watching it, but I could just not pull, I couldn't pull away. I wish I had a distraction. I wish I had some Global 10 work to complete. So I created this week's assignment to help give you a distraction that would pull you away from watching things like Tiger King. So here we go. So after World War II, after the fighting, millions of deaths, and the realization the world needs to rebuild itself, a looming question was what to do with the colonies that had been in possession since the mid 1800s. Now remember that the whole point of World War II was to prevent dictators from conquering the world. Ironic because the countries that were fighting to prevent that from happening had actually done the same thing in Africa, India, and China by taking colonies. But as the power of the European countries began to decrease because of the war, it was the perfect time for these colonies, these imperialized states, to gain their freedom and to gain their independence. Unfortunately, as the imperialized areas gained their independence, they immediately faced a challenge: how to build a nation. I mean, think about the challenges Africans would face. They had to figure out tribal problems. They had to resolve those issues. A lack of natural resources because the Europeans took them. The Europeans would still have large corporations in control of a ton of wealth in those countries. And simply, who would run the country and how would that be decided? So, in North Africa, identified in red on the map, the transition to independent nations was easier than the sub Saharan countries. The key thing in Northern Africa was the commonality of religion in that region. North Africa is predominantly Islamic. Having that connection made the transition easier, by no means perfect, but the fact that the North Africans shared a common culture, you did not see the issues that occurred in other areas in Africa. So a challenge was that after the European countries decided to leave, there were a small but powerful number of Europeans that were not going to leave. They did not want anything to change, and this would result in fighting. And Algeria is one of the best slash worst examples of this internal fighting during the nationalist movements in Northern Africa. Just as France was giving up its colonies, Great Britain is going to do the same thing. We're going to look at the journey of three colonies turned countries and analyze the challenges that each location was met with. The first city-state that we're going to look at is going to be the country of Ghana, a small colony on the west coast of Africa that gained its independence from the British. Now, it's important to remember there were Africans that were educated and capable of leading. They just needed the opportunity. Kwame Nkrumah is the man that would lead Ghana to independence. He modeled his approach after Gandhi: peaceful, nonviolent, and fought for an improved living standard for the people of Ghana. Nkrumah wanted to pursue all of these great programs that are being listed on the slide, but when they took time to create or cost a lot of money, opposition would rally against him. This is a trend that we find in Africa. Leaders would try to do good things, but would often be undermined, forced to leave power, and then internal fighting would happen between military leaders, political leaders, social leaders, and this would often lead to violence. So as a result of this violence, it makes progress very difficult, and as a result, you still see many African countries struggling economically because of this lack of political stability. Another country that faced a similar fate is Kenya. Once a colony of Great Britain, Kenya was given independence and now needed to figure out how to govern itself with this new freedom. So the leader of Kenya during their independence movement is an educated man by the name of Jomo Kenyatta. Kenyatta tried doing the right things for the people of Kenya, but unfortunately these actions often went against British interests. Now, you might be thinking, England left, so why should they have a say? Even though the government left, British businesses were still there. These British businesses were very powerful and they were very influential and made a lot of money for England. So if these businesses fell or resources went to the Kenyans, which they should have because it's their country and their resources, the British would lose lots of money. So what they did is that they undermined Kenyatta and arrested him and put a leader in, put in a leader that was pro-British. So even though that it was an African leader ruling Kenya, this African leader did not do what was best for the Kenyans. Rather, he did what was best for British interests, which also landed him a great deal of money for his actions. So after the death of Kenyatta, the same issues that happened in Ghana would happen in Kenya. Constant fighting over political control. This fighting would again lead to political instability, assassinations, civil wars, and an economic environment where the economy could not grow and quality of life improvements could not be made. So as a result, each of these leaders would make promises, but they would never fulfill those promises, or they would be killed before they could. In the countries of Congo and Angola, we see the violent impact of this political instability. Constant civil wars prevent the countries from being able to grow, and even worse, we see the use of child soldiers. Warlords would recruit young kids, they give them drugs and women and guns and a sense of purpose, when in reality, these warlords are just using the kids, but these young kids don't know any better, and as a result, we see kids that should be in middle school engaging in firefights with automatic weapons. These regions in Africa had rich, valuable resources, gold and diamonds, enough wealth that could have provided stability. But instead of peacefully developing a nation, these selfish warlords engaged in endless violence to gain control of these resources and used children as the pawns in their quest for power and wealth. In the country of South Africa, independence did not lead to the political instability and death that we saw in Ghana, Kenya, Congo, and Angola, but that does not mean that the South African people had a smooth transition to freedom. South Africans faced a new challenge, overcoming the obstacle of apartheid. So, apartheid is the legal segregation between white and black South Africans. The white South Africans were the small minority of the population with complete control of the best resources, the property, the jobs. They held all the wealth and all of the political power. The black majority lived a completely different life. So I want you to take a look at the slides and read what happened to the black South Africans during apartheid. So even after the British government left South Africa, apartheid still remained. The rich and the powerful white South Africans did not want to leave. They had it made. The whites controlled the government, they controlled the police, they had all the perks. But that is not to say the black South Africans did not fight against apartheid, and they wanted to take control of South Africa. So the African National Congress attempted to create change, but these changes were continually stopped in government discussions. The white minority that had all of the power in government simply just would not let these changes happen. At times, the efforts of the African National Congress to bring to light the changes that needed to be made were met with violence. We even see the murder of 69 black South Africans that were peacefully protesting against the practice of apartheid. So things turned violent in South Africa, and the white minority who had control in the government forced the African National Congress to disband, claiming that it was promoting the violence. Now we can see the white minority did this so that they could consolidate power and prevent a non-apartheid voice from being heard in South Africa. So as you can see from the last slide, innocent, not to say innocent, but protesting men against apartheid They were thrown in jail without trial, so their basic human rights were being violated. The fact that innocent men, women, and children were being murdered, again, for exercising basic rights that most countries around the world guaranteed their citizens, really kind of put the world on notice to say, hey, when are countries going to step in and help? So what happened was countries began putting economic sanctions on South Africa until it stopped practicing apartheid. What I mean by economic sanctions is that they basically stopped trading with South Africa or really started to hurt the financial well-being of South Africa, which directly impacted the white Africans living there that were in power. So the white Africans all of a sudden now started to realize to say, man, we really need to change something because now it's impacting our pocketbooks. So the white South Africans were forced to end the policy of apartheid, and this led to the first free elections in South Africa. The free elections changed the course of South African history. The last president to serve under the time of apartheid was F.W. de Klerk. He was against apartheid and really helped in creating a smooth transition of power after the first free election in 1994. In 1994, Nelson Mandela was elected president of South Africa. Now, Mandela had been a long-time activist against apartheid. For his actions, he was jailed for 26 years without ever facing a trial. He was just thrown in jail. So his time in prison served as a constant reminder of how unjust and unfair the apartheid policy was, and he really became a symbol for ending this practice. So Mandela's election to the presidency marked an end of the policy, but the effects of apartheid are still felt today. Just like other African nations, despite having freedom and independence, the reality is that life between white Africans and black Africans is far from equal. You guys are going to watch a video connected to one of the assignments that's going to take you through what modern day life looks like in South Africa. But just a little bit of a summary to it is that white Africans still live in the better homes, they have the better schools, they have the better jobs, they live in the best neighborhoods, kids go to the best schools, etc. So even though apartheid is done, now the next challenge is trying to create social equality for both whites and blacks in South Africa. All right, guys, so that takes us to an end of looking at nationalism in Africa. So you guys are going to have a couple of assignments that'll be posted to you on Google Classroom. Take your time in completing those. They're not going to be due until after the weekend, so I'm going to have them be due on Monday. I know that I'm posting this video a little bit late on Wednesday instead of Monday, so I'm going to give you guys a little bit of extra time to do this assignment. When we come back together, we're going to look at the kind of the unfortunate side of independence, and that's the tribal conflicts that existed in Africa post-World War II. All right, guys, so as always, stay healthy, stay well, keep practicing social distancing, and hopefully I'll see you guys as soon as possible. If you have any questions, as always, guys, just send me an email, reach out, don't hesitate. Any question's a good question. All right, guys, be well.